Okay, go ahead, Mahlet.
Okay, yeah, it's recording. Yes, so welcome, greetings, and welcome everyone. Right, we got it. And yeah, welcome to our webinar called I Am My Sister's Keeper. I would like to welcome especially Her Excellency Ambassador Mahlet Hailu, Deputy Permanent Representative Mission of Ethiopia to Geneva, and also Dr. Mama Desta, who is also a columnist on Capital newspaper in Ethiopia and a co-founder Ethiopia Rastafari Council. And also we have our speaker, Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao. She will hopefully join us in few minutes. And also I would like to welcome my colleagues here at Defend Ethiopia Task Force in Europe, and welcome to all of you, to the audience who committed and who dedicated your time tonight here to listen to us and to get to know what inspired this webinar, I Am My Sister's Keeper, and to listen to from our African sisters. Yeah, so this webinar is one of the Pan-African webinar series by Defend Ethiopia. But tonight we are here to remember and celebrate our sisters, African women, who stood up and spoke up unapologetically for Africans' rights. So this webinar is dedicated and also, maybe if you wish to say, an advocacy for African women who work in the United Nations and African Union, who are dismissed and silenced for speaking up for Africans' well-being. This webinar is tonight unique episode of the Pan-African webinar series, because prior to the webinar, we have launched a Twitter campaign and also a short video. Those of you who might have seen part of it before I start to speak. So this is a special one. And also in this webinar, or in this video, we may have called out 3 African sisters, namely Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, Sister Morina Ching, Sister Denia Gale, who are, dismissed because they spoke the truth, who stood up for Africans' right. But nonetheless, I would like to bring this to your attention, that as I speak to you today, or at this moment, we have African women who are being silenced and put under a continued investigation, and who are not also in their position, because again, they spoke up just like their sisters, and they challenged the narrative that's pushed out by these organizations to undermine Africa. So as I speak to you, I have a sister whom I happen to know from Nigeria, who works for one of UN agency. Her name for now remains to be anonymous, because she's under investigation for the past 8 months, and she's not in her position. So she's not in her workplace. In fact, this woman has, what she did is she spoke the truth. She has advocated for Africans and her people's well-being, and she spoke the truth as well about Ethiopia, because her position first was for one of UN agency in Ethiopia during the conflict time, but then immediately after her comments, she was reassigned to another place, but she didn't stop talking the truth, so she's now under investigation. So in fact, she is the reason for the birth of this campaign, I Am My Sister Keeper. So I asked myself, as I followed her story, if I or you or together, if not us, then who will be the keeper of our sisters? While we all reminisce on that, especially the audience, I will go without further ado. I will invite my colleague. Are you with us? From Defend Ethiopia, perhaps first, before we go to our guest speaker, just to say briefly about Defend Ethiopia, if he is with us.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes,
You're
I'm
there?
here. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so yeah, I'll give you the floor just to tell us about Defend Ethiopia. So go ahead, like 3 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mahlet, for this introduction. And good evening and good afternoon to every one of you. If you allow me, I'll share a couple of slides and try to be brief in 3 minutes so that we can go directly to the subject matter. So I'll briefly present some of the achievements we've done as Defend Ethiopia for those of you who know us or who don't know us, who we are and what we do. And I will not go to all these bullet points, don't worry. I'll try to brief in finish in 3 minutes. So Defend Ethiopia as a task force is a group of professionals and scholars in Europe, from the diaspora, the Ethiopian diaspora, who are trying to defend Ethiopia. And it was born in the United Kingdom just after the conflict in the north started, that is in November 2020. A number of us in different countries were engaged in similar endeavors in terms of confronting the misinformation and disinformation we were noticing in our respective countries. So in April, we gathered and created this group called Defend Ethiopia Task Force in Europe. It's organized initially in 12, now in 14 countries. So we have representation in all these countries that you see on the slide. So this illustration was made, well, it is in Amharic, most of it, but it was a pretty good illustration of the task or the mission we had at the time. As you can see, you have the map, the countries, the Ethiopia's map being held by the leader, then by the government, and then by the people themselves. The three of them having limitations. They're not perfect. They have limitations, so they just can do the best they can. And on the left top, you can see what we call the external pressure. These are folks in the various countries, the policymakers, the UN agencies, the think tanks, and the media groups that are exerting several types of pressures on the country. And our mission was, in simple wording, was to take one of these ropes down. And internally also, the country has a lot of challenges, as we all know. So this illustration is just to show what our mission is. So our initial objective was this. We said we want to confront the misinformation that we are noticing, the Western medias, a lot of the countries, the policymakers, the think tanks, academia, were all relaying false or misguided narrative that misled public opinion. So we said our objective would be to confront that and to challenge the policies. And we also will try to win the hearts and mind of citizens in the countries we live in. These are the activities. I will not go into each of them. We have a steering group that conducts all these. We've been regularly meeting at least once a week for the past 2 years, almost 2 years, at least once. Sometimes we've met 2 or 3 times per week. And we try to make campaigns, and we try to monitor ourselves, and we discuss the current issues and set agendas. These are the several work streams that we have. We have a social media wing. We have also a mainstream media wing, and mostly the diplomacy and lobbying part, where we also do a lot of it in a digital manner. And it's not listed here, but we also have a work stream that Mahlet mentioned earlier. That's the work stream she's leading, which is the Pan-African, what we call the Pan-African wing, trying to emphasize that Ethiopia's challenges today is actually an African challenge, and it should be shared by all our African brothers and sisters and governments as well, in terms of finding solutions to it. So since 2020, since November, we've worked towards the objective. We've done, like I told you, we've had regular meetings to update ourselves on setting agendas and making several digital campaigns. We've sent out emails and social media campaigns to very targeted people and groups. The last I checked, we had sent 22 letters to over 30,000 recipients. These include very targeted people like the European governments, European Union, the commissioners, the parliamentarians, and also the UN agencies, particularly some who are in Geneva, acting on human rights issues. We've also held several demonstrations in several European cities, and we've held several webinars with the objective of raising awareness about the subject. These are some of the letters we have. They are all on our website, defendethiopia.com. You can go and see all of them. You can see how the tone and the substance has evolved over the year and a half. So in terms of numbers and impact, we have several success stories. I don't want to go into them now, but we've sent out, like I told you, over 30,000 emails to really targeted and specific people. And we also monitor the rate of readership and reply. In terms of Twitter campaigns also, we have very sharp targeted handles that we intelligently distribute when we do our campaigns. We regularly do monitor the effectiveness of our campaigns, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And there are many success stories that I won't go here. It's just to give you a bit of an idea of what we're doing. These are the recent letters we sent, and they were co-signed by 14 organizations worldwide in all the continents of Ethiopian advocacy groups. And they were pretty effective in terms of reach. They were really well spread, well distributed. This is how we monitor, just to show you how we monitor our impact. We have quantitative data. We see how many emails we send, the tweets we send, the number of people it reached. It's usually in the millions. We also do qualitative assessments. That means we try to see if really there was a behavioral or diplomatic impact. And we do that by monitoring the news articles and the people we have targeted. We have targeted how they react or have reacted to our campaigns. And I'll forget this one. So with this concludes my introduction, brief introduction. This webinar is very timely. As you know, we have a peace deal now, which is opening a new chapter, hopefully a permanent or a lasting one. We all should celebrate it with all the due vigilance that is required. We are vigilant, but we should celebrate the fact that we have a peace deal now. And also, it's a reminder that a lot of people who have spoken in some UN entities or elsewhere have contributed to this outcome. And it's also very timely that Mahlet organized this session. With this, I give the floor back to you, and I wish you all a very fruitful discussion. Thank you, Mahlet.
Thank you, Keynote, for that introduction. So now I will invite our guest speaker, Her Excellency Ambassador Mahlet Haile-Gwadde, who and I have the honor and the pleasure, if you allow me, to introduce her briefly. Ambassador Mahlet Haile-Gwadde is appointed as Deputy Permanent Representative at the Permanent Mission of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to the United Nations in Geneva since December 2020. Ambassador Mahlet began working as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia in 1998. She began her career at the African Department and later joined Permanent Mission of Ethiopia to the African Union. In 2004, she was posted to the General Consulate of Ethiopia in Los Angeles as a vice consul. She also worked in Ethiopia Embassy in Paris, where she served in different capacities, including as the chargé d'affaires for 1 year, from 2009 to 2010. So upon her return to Addis Ababa, Ambassador Mahlet was assigned at the Prime Minister's office as a Director Protocol and Foreign Relations. She was responsible for organizing the day-to-day activities of the Prime Minister, amongst others. Following that, she was appointed as a Deputy Permanent Representative at the Permanent Mission of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to the United Nations in New York from 2016 to 2018. There, she particularly covered the United Nations Security Council as a mission, among other things. Prior to her current appointment, Ambassador Mahlet holds the permanent secretary position as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and was responsible for Asia, European, and American and multilateral affairs. Ambassador Mahlet Hailu holds a bachelor degree in political science and international relations from the Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia, and her MA in international relations from CNAM. That is Conservative National des Arts et Métiers, if I pronounced it right, in Paris. So she understands and writes and speaks fluently. She's multilingual. So Ambassador Mahlet Hailu is born in 1976 and the mother of one daughter. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mahlet. Let me, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahlet. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate at this webinar discussion. Let me also thank Keynote and all his colleagues for the tremendous job they are doing at Defend Ethiopia. They are doing a very important and colossal work. So I want to recognize them as well. As I was saying, I was very much honored to be amongst you to share a few thoughts on today's topic, which is I am my sister keeper. But let me start with by the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, to achieve the 2030 vision, healthy and empowered women are at the heart of the SDGs. For this reason, various political leadership across the globe also advocate for the health, well-being, and empowerment of women, including their placement at the highest political level, high-level agenda, and budgets, right? Women have the rights and the capacity to participate in leadership positions and political representations as outlined in the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, as well as the Beyecha Platform Action. The question is, are we putting the necessary frameworks to accordingly achieve the SDGs objectives on women? As for me, I believe only a few women who broke free from the shackles of existing patriarchal and discriminatory customs have climbed up the corporate ladder. Of course, we have also, we need also to recognize that some others with a prerequisite qualification have had also or had also been given the opportunity to achieve their objectives. But be it as it may, we women have become transformative leaders. Their performance at the helm of the leadership is much more building an organizational culture, creating state of peace and harmony, and sustaining growth, as they have wider perspective on various issues and believe in collective decision making process. Their management and unique characteristics make them successful in leadership position. Even with a multitude of responsibility, women at the helm of organizations have demonstrated their ability on numerous occasions. Regrettably, however, the journey of this women leadership is most of the time harsh due to invisible challenges. Most of the time, they are considered as outsiders because they are basically joining the quote-unquote men's club. Because of this, they face a number of hurdles to climb up the corporate ladder. Not only that, even though they have all the qualifications, they are most of the time discredited and associated with gender parity connotation, privileges when they come up with new ideas and momentum, right? When they stand out, they become like beehives. Their hard truth and brave revelations of inconsistencies or activities within an organization they belong to, or their small missteps gathers overall criticism. Unfortunately, their women compatriots are few in numbers or non-existent. And those who are there, it seems, shy away from standing shoulder to shoulder in their defense. In comparison, the solidarity among the men is glaring and at times very much unsettling. While the women are heavily scrutinized, men's actions are often overlooked, or should I say, tolerated. Women are reprimanded comparatively in harsher terms than their male colleagues. Men are often seen to come to the rescue of their peers. Besides, women are also excluded from informal networks where most of the men tend to have additional information about issues that are of importance. Of course, these forums are also used, as I previously mentioned, to scrutinize, to overlook, or to tolerate one's activities, right? So I would like to throw some question back to the audience. Aren't we therefore witnessing double standards? In the past few years, didn't we witness a lot of women in leadership being ushered out unceremoniously, while many men have committed a serious mistake, are still allowed to stay or easily relocated to avert further scrutiny? And here we have the example of the WHO Director General. How tolerant is the system for women speaking the truth? Should we not pose genuine questions for the gender-based discrimination we see rampant in various international organizations today? As for me, it is my earnest belief that it is high time for women to strategize in order to transform this patriarchal culture and politics so that we really promote gender equality. In addition, women leaders, I believe, should also create a strong network, not only to demand their place in the boardroom, but also to create the much needed solidarity amongst them. With these few thoughts, I leave it up to you, Mahlet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, really for bringing that up and for those questions. Hopefully they will generate more thoughts, and when we will come back to the question and answer session, hopefully we will be able to entertain them. I have a great honor and a pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao. Please allow me to do a proper introduction. Her Excellency Ambassador Arikana Chihombori-Quao, she's a medical doctor, she's founder and president of the African Diaspora Development Institute, known as ADDI. She is also a founder. She is also a medical doctor, having practiced medicine for over 25 years. She's a founder and owner of medical clinics, public speaker, educator, entrepreneur. She's also an author. Her recently published book, Africa 101, The Wake Up Call, is a best seller on Amazon. Prior to this, her role as permanent representative to the African Union mission in Washington, D.C., for 3 years, from 2016 to 2019, Her Excellency Dr. Arikana worked tirelessly towards fulfilling her mandate, which was to undertake, develop, and maintain relationships between the African Union and the executive and legislative branches of the U.S. government, the African Diplomatic Corps, the Africans in the diaspora, and the Bretton Woods institutions. Her efforts at mobilizing the diaspora as people of African descent and not as citizens of any single African country is unprecedented and exemplifies her ability to unify people around a common goal, speaking with one voice, one Africa, and one continent. Before her appointment as AU ambassador, Her Excellency contributions to the cause of Africa had earned her many prestigious honors, such as the first one was the Achievement Award, which she received in 1996 from the incumbent president, President Madiba Nelson Mandela, the late president. And also the second one is being the African Woman of Excellence Award, which she received in 2015. During AU Summit in South Africa, she was awarded this alongside other 15 other prominent African women, to mention a few: former president of Liberia, Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former president of Malawi, Madam Joyce Banda, Mama Winnie Mandela, Mama Njinga Kenyatta, and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. During her 3-year tenure as AU ambassador to the United States, Her Excellency received over 100 awards and attestations from many organizations, including the African Diaspora with Americas. For example, in 2018, she received as ambassador of the year from Howard University. She also received numerous recognitions from members of Congresses, as well as governors, mayors, and county executives across the US, and also in from the Caribbean and South America. The African continent is also recognizing Her Excellency Ambassador Arikana Chihombori-Quao for what she's making to the development of Africa. For example, in January 2020, she was named as a profile in Courage. In 2020, again, by the Guardian newspaper in Nigeria, she was listed as the 4th influential Africans. In 2019, Person of the Year. It goes on. The Reputation Poll, a leading global reputation management firm, in its July 2020 issue release of the 2020 list of 100 most reputable Africans, also features Her Excellency Dr. Arikana as one of the most reputable Africans. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Family Physicians and a member of the American Association of Family Physicians, as well as the Tennis Association of Family Physicians. Her Excellency was born and raised in Zimbabwe, where she attained her primary and secondary education. She then left Zimbabwe to the US, where she obtained her BA in General Chemistry and her MA in Organic Chemistry, and of course a Doctor of Medicine degree. Her Excellency Ambassador Arikana Chihombori-Quao is married to her Ghanaian husband and the mother of 5 children and a grandmother of 5 grandchildren. And on that mother note, please allow me to add also, Ambassador Dr. Arikana is also known as by most of us, by Africans at home and in the diaspora as Mama Africa. Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you.
There you go. I was muted. Thank you so much, Mahlet, and also to Her Excellency Ambassador Mahlet. Thank you for the wonderful, thought-provoking questions that you posed to us at the end of your presentation. To the organizers of this wonderful program, my dear daughter, keep up the great work. Voices like yours are so needed in this particular time in our history as people of African descent outside Africa, as well as Africans on the continent. The voices must continue to become louder and louder. The questions that were posed by the ambassador are prominent and relevant. And it's something that we all should stop and think about. But as I was trying to decide what to focus on in my presentation today, I always find myself going back to knowledge. In order for us women to be true leaders that we need to be, just like men, we must be armed with knowledge. Just like men, we must understand the terrain that we're working in. For every situation, for every moment, for every location, the strategies are different. Let's be very clear about one thing. While Black men also have platforms to climb when we're dealing with those who don't look like us, we also have another layer to climb, our own men, unfortunately. So understanding that we're already at a disadvantage, most of us growing up in Africa, we all were raised by women who were very powerful, women who made our fathers think ideas were theirs, when actually the ideas were coming from the mothers. We have to be strategic. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but sometimes we have to play the game because they're playing games as well. I wanted to start by sharing with you some of the mothers, the leaders of yesteryear that fought vicious wars, that stood out and were fearless. And allow me to share with you the story of Nanaya Asantwa. This was the gatekeeper of the golden stool in the Ashanti Kingdom. As you're all aware, the British, any leader, any chief, any king who tried to rise and fight against the British and organize resistance, they were quickly arrested and either killed or sent to Mauritius in exile. But this current chief, the king, was in exile in Mauritius. And the governor of the Ashanti Kingdom at that time, a British guy, had decided he was going to take the golden stool to the United Kingdom. When the men of the Ashanti, realizing that this was an opportunity for them to get their king back, they had negotiated that the golden stool could go to the UK on condition that their king is brought back. Nanaya Asantwa, a woman, upon hearing this terrible story, terrible news, he confronted the men, and his speech, and I'm going to paraphrase, his speech went as follows. Is it true that the Ashanti man, the bravery of the Ashanti man is no more? Is it true that you are getting ready to give up the spirit of the Ashanti people in exchange for a king? If that is the case, she said, I am going to call upon all my women friends, and we will pick up arms and fight the British until every single one of us is down. This was a woman. So she shamed the Ashanti men, who then got together and fought to defend the golden stool. in order to understand the importance of the golden stool for the Ashanti people, the spirit of a whole people, born, yet to be born, and those who have gone by, resides in that golden stool. So giving up that golden stool would have giving up the spirit of a people. To this day, the Ashanti people still have their golden stool, thanks to one woman who was fearless, one woman who was unafraid to speak the truth and state the facts for what they are. May I remind you to look back in each one of you, whatever countries you come from, wherever you're listening to, there are many stories of such fearless women. Well, I tell you, my brothers and sisters, we are at that crucial moment where we can no longer afford to be afraid. Yes, we have local battles with our men in Africa, but let's also realize that while we are fighting those local battles with our men in the boardrooms, in cabinets across the continent, let's not forget the invisible hand. The invisible hand that has such a tight grip on anything that we try to do as Africans. Look at the various instabilities across the continent, the wars, the coups. For a continent that doesn't have a single gun manufacturing plant, we have an endless supply of guns. Where are the guns coming from? Let's ask those definite, obvious questions. We know there are others who are benefiting from our instability. Let's face those invisible hands head on. Let's speak truth to power. They have lied to us. They have made us believe that we were the problem. I'm not saying we don't have any problems to shelter, not by any stretch of imagination. I'm simply saying, let's understand our issues in their totality. It is my humble opinion that over 70% of Africa's problems are generated exogenously. I repeat that. Over 70% of Africa's issues are generated exogenously as a way of making sure that while we are in a turmoil, they continue to exploit our beloved continent. If you were to take an analysis of all the areas of conflict, you will not find conflict in any area or any country where there are no natural resources, where there are no oil reserves, where there are no gas reserves. They are always forever trying to find a way of keeping us destabilized in order for them to continue to exploit us. So yes, while we are also fighting from home, our husbands, all the way to at work, at whatever level, but let's also speak with one voice and fight the invisible hand. We all know who those culprits are. They've been at play since colonization. They've never left, and they continue to a great extent to control Africa's resources, African economies. To date, Ethiopia is in a bit of a different situation in the sense that the Italians were not successful enough to have a stronghold like the French do in the former colonies. And of course, the British and the Germans and all that, their citizens who are multinationals, who have been multinationals since colonization, have never left. They continue to run those economies. You take Germany, for example. I was just in Namibia, and it's really sad to realize that Namibia is still pretty much under colonization. All the rich areas of Namibia, they're occupied by the Germans. All those areas around Windhoek where there's good rains, good soil, those lands, Namibians can't afford to buy land over there. Namibians can't even afford to buy land in Windhoek. You have to go up north to the reserves where Black people were sent to by apartheid South Africa. That situation still exists to this day. Namibia is classified as a middle income country, not because the Namibians, the Black Namibians are doing well, but because the white Namibians who are Germans, they are doing well. And they're the ones that are making it difficult for the country to really access the funding they need because they are now classified as middle income. But the middle income people are not us. So I'm saying this to say the issues raised by the ambassador are so crucial that we as women, we must make a commitment to stick together, to bond together, to speak with one voice, because our men do. But once we pass that level, we must unite with those men to also fight a bigger battle. And that is the battle of those outside forces that are creating havoc. You take, for example, the situation in the northern part of Ethiopia, the Tigray region. Who is funding them? Who is funding them? Where are the guns coming from? Follow the guns and you'll understand the enemy. Follow the guns in the DRC and you'll understand the enemy. Follow the guns wherever there's conflict in Africa and you will know who the enemy is. And so, as we talk about being my sister's keeper, let's also understand the bigger enemy. But I cannot agree with the ambassador enough that we as women, let's understand our challenges as we enter the workforce to work with our men who we cannot live with and we cannot live without. And we must also make a commitment to be a cohesive unit, particularly in situations where the men stand to divide us and make sure that we're always ending up at the short end of the stick. Yes, there are double standards, no question about it. But we must continue to push on. African Union has embarked on gender parity. I think the AU has done a good job at the AU level, but that good job needs to be spread on to the rest of the continent. We would like to see gender parity at every level, at the cabinet level, parliamentarians, because women, we all know and are in agreement with no doubt at all that when we have women leaders, countries move mountains because we can be trusted, because we deal with issues from the heart. We look at it from a family perspective. Unfortunately, sometimes our men don't always have that bird's eye view on issues. So yes, it is that if a country was to focus on women, if a country was to empower women through their policies, that is a country that can thrive. Perfect example is what's happening in Rwanda. President Kagame has done a tremendous job of incorporating women and empowering them into leadership roles. I would hope that more and more African leaders can take a page out of Rwanda and increase the female representation in their cabinets, in their parliamentarians throughout the continent. And yes, solidarity among us women, solidarity based on facts, solidarity based on knowledge, and of course, solidarity that is fearless. We have absolutely nothing to fear as women. Stand up to those men and speak truth to power. Let's not be intimidated. Remember, we gave birth to them. They wouldn't be if it were not for you and I. So let's be fearless. Let's fight our battles at every level, but let's also be very clear what battle we are fighting and what level we are fighting. Let's not forget the bigger enemy, the invisible hands that are ultimately controlling Africa's future. The invisible hand that are going to ultimately decide how Africa develops unless we stand together and push back and fight and defend what belongs to us. Africa for the Africans at home and abroad. Plain and simple. The others, they gotta go. You must come into Africa the same way we go into their countries. We don't go to China and dictate what Chinese should do. We go by what they say we should do. But the same should be true when they come to Africa. They should abide by our rules, by our laws, pay your taxes, behave. No money laundering, no tax havens, no siphoning resources out of Africa illegally. We can only achieve that goal if we can come together and speak with one voice. So yes, I am my sister's keeper. Let's stick together, let's unite and push back and defend our turf. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, for that powerful message. Thank you. Yeah, indeed, we have to understand our enemy in order to fight back. So on that note, I am going to pass to our, for the day, the last speaker, but not last of the session. We have question and answers session as well. To Dr. Mama Desta Magfu. Again, I have an honor and a pleasure to introduce Dr. Mama Desta. So let me introduce Mama Desta. Dr. Mama Desta Yeshimabit Maghu is a Juris Doctor. She's a creative consultant, curator, writer, Pan-African advocate, and cultural promoter and expert in diaspora engagement based in Addis Ababa since 2005. She's a co-curator of the Addis Ababa University Institute of Ethiopia Studies Pan-African Wing and is a contributor to the Capital Ethiopian newspaper. Since 2008, for 14 years, she served as liaison to the African Union for the Ghana-based Diaspora Africa Forum, where she participated in several major diaspora meetings, workshops, and conferences. And prior to this, for 1 year, from 2004 to 2005, she served as managing director of the Bob Marley Foundation and also as an acting director of the University of Florida Levin College at Law Center for Race and Race Relation. That is for 4 years from 2001 to 2004. Mama Desta, born in Jamaica in 1961, she migrated to New York in the 1970s with her family and was mentored from the 80s to the 90s by the Pan-African advocates, academicians, and ambassadors such as Ambassador Dudley Thompson and Dr. Leonard Jeffries. She began her work in Africa in the early 90s, honing her Pan-African approach to the arts as a development tool with like-minded artists, including the reggae tune Dr. Nana Rita Marley, Nigeria Sonny Okosun, Angelique Kidjo, Lauren Hill, Pato Ranking, Oliver Mitikudzi, Dr. Mulato Statke, and visual artists like Julie Mheratu, Desta Hagos, Daniel Taye, and Prince Merita Fese. Other clients also include Embassy of Ghana, Embassy of Portugal, Embassy of USA, and US Mission to the African Union, UN agencies, UNIOM, UNOHCHR, UNICEF, and several others, and individuals who wish to use art and culture in their strategies to market and promote various issues and concerns. Dr. Mama Desta holds a Juris Doctorate from the University of Florida Levin College of Law and BA in Business from Nova Southeastern University. Her and her husband, Ethiopian fine artist Prince Merita Fese, founded and ran the Children's Village projects from 2005 to 2012 for orphans, homeless, and vulnerable children in Arat Kilo or Piazza, serving up to 100 children per day, providing meals, art, culture, and other activities. Mama Desta and her husband share also Moambasa Art Studio Gallery where they live in Casanchez, with emerging and established artists, exhibitions, and talks as well. Above all, however, Dr. Desta, affectionately called as Mama Desta, including myself, she has one big accomplishment in this life, which is being a mother of 10 and a grandmother of 14 children. With that, Mama Desta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be with our Excellencies, Ambassador Mahlet and Ambassador Arikana, someone who I consider a sister also on this journey on Pan-Africanism. I am really moved by the words of both ambassadors, sisters, because it's relevant, it's true, it's timely, but it's tiring for us to keep saying this and beating down these walls, year after year after year in 2021. And so my proposal is a bit different. And I think the approach or the interventions I would like to make are on two different levels. One, the sisterhood itself. Having been a friend to Maureen, you mentioned Maureen Achieng and what Maureen went through, and also being a friend and a sister to Ambassador, Her Excellency, Dr. Arikana. And when you know someone close and you experience it, you feel it. It's a different thing than when you're reading about it and it's salacious and you want to get all the information. It's very painful, especially when you understand how committed African women are that enter these spheres. And I'll talk about the UN and the AU in the second part, because I think we're also talking about institutional reform that has to be addressed. But in the context of having strong, bright, switched on, ready women who are at the helm and then basically kick to the curb when they do their job. Because knowing Maureen, and I've worked with IOM, they were one of my clients when Maureen was here in Addis, and I am speaking to you from Addis Ababa, where we have a president who's a woman, President Sahale Work. So we have wonderful examples here in Ethiopia as well. But it was very painful. It was very painful to see someone make comments that I love Ethiopia, I love Africa, I'm an African, and this is why I'm speaking out. And the UN's response was to take her out of her space. So, as I said, two things, institutional and the sisterhood. We must be there. We must create a safe space for each other. The spaces that we find ourselves in, whether as ambassadors or advocates that are on the front line, we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable. And we do rely on our families, our loved ones, kith and kin, but certainly our sphere, because even our family doesn't understand what we do and why we do it. It's difficult. You know, you're working how many hours a day, you're giving this much, you're giving, they don't fully understand the sacrifices that are being made for the greater good. And so if we can ensure that before women are even entering the diplomatic corps or the UN, these institutions can have a space where they're learning certain skills, if you will, a separate skill sets that allows them to go in. I think the survival rate and our ability to do our job without compromising is possible. When I entered law school, I was, well, first of all, I was a pre-med student and I had no mentors. And I stepped away from pre-med because I said, I just can't take this. This is not me. As much as I love people and want to heal, I didn't have a mentor to help me discern between my personal self and the profession. However, when I went to law school, started my Juris Doctorate, I did have a mentor. She was the only Black female law professor at the University of Florida College of Law. And when I went to her and I said, Professor Jacobs, I can't do this. I cannot subscribe to these laws that are so racist, so wrong. And she said, let me tell you something. Do you know what it took for you to get in here? You know how many thousands you competed against? And at the time, I was a mother of 10. My twins were barely a year old. So she said, you need to separate your mind. You're not compromising and forgetting, but when you're tackling, and this goes to what Ambassador Arikana said, right? You have to be prepared and be strategic. And sometimes you have to play the game. But who knows that? Most of the time we figure that out afterwards. Oh, if I had only put a comma here or a colon there or a quotation mark there, air quotes, you mean I could have flown under the radar? Who knew? Who knew? So again, where the sisters are concerned, and let me tell you something, we're strong, all right? What we have in our genetic makeup is something that European women don't have and never experienced. They were considered chattel and did not vote until the 1920s through the suffrage movement. We had centuries, millennia of experience ruling, legislating. This is who we were. This was our history. And so part of the restoration or the sisterhood is coming back to who we are as African women and not trying to claim other identities. And I know one of the things that has been creeping into Africa is this notion of feminism. We don't know about that. That really is not our narrative. Our narrative is trying to get back to our greatness. Dr. Arikana mentioned Ya Asantewa before. Powerful story. There's Nzinga, there's Candace, there's Taitu. We have endless amount of women to show what our history and hence what our trajectory should be. So if we begin to tap into that power, tap into that strength, tap into our own identity, not an identity that has been appropriated on us, but what we know, and we look in that mirror, we don't see blonde hair, blue eyes. It's just not us. It's not our story. Hence, the approach and the strategies that we use when we get into these institutions are quite different. And very frankly, and I was just watching it today, I remember when I moved to America, it was quite different. You're coming from a small Black island into, it was New York in the 70s, quite white, quite racist. And I got into a lot of African-American books, and one of them was The Spook Who Sat by the Door, a story about, a fictional story about a CIA agent, a Black CIA agent, the only one allowed in. And he went in, Spook Who Sat by the Door, got all the knowledge, and then took it back into the streets to try to help empower his people based on that knowledge. So there are attributes and assets when we enter these institutions if we are civic minded and don't just necessarily want to maintain the status quo, especially a status quo that we cannot change so easily. But if we can pull the policies, the information, the insight, the strategies that they know and take it into the community and shape it accordingly, then we have a chance. Because very frankly, and I'm going to read you very briefly from 1963, this is what, almost 60 years ago, a speech that His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie made at the United Nations, okay, where he says the United Nations judgments have been and continue to be subject to frustration as individual member states have ignored its pronouncements and disregarded its recommendations. The organization's sinews have been weakened as member states have shirked their obligations to it. The authority of the organization has been mocked as individual member states have proceeded in violation of its commands to pursue their own aims and ends. The trouble which continues to plague us virtually all arise among member states of the organization, but the organization remains impotent to enforce acceptable solutions. As the maker and enforcer of the international law, what the United Nations has achieved still falls regrettably short of our goal of an international community of nations. This does not mean that the United Nations has failed. There is no single magic formula, no one simple step, no words, whether written into organization's charter or into a treaty between states, which can automatically guarantee us what we seek. So again, you know, we would be foolhardy to think that whether our sister Marine or anyone else that enters an institution that up to 60 years ago, the Majesty and the Emperor, Ethiopia is one of the founding members, right, of the UN, coming through from the League of Nations where they had status. So 60 years ago, we're still looking at the UN. What else could we expect? What else could we expect? As a matter of fact, the Africa report the UN descendants of African, African descendants UN organization or entity, if you will, not organization, did a report, a survey, June 2020, that found 52% out of the 2,857 who were interviewed spoke about racism, blatant racism. And in our case with women, we've got the abuse and the discrimination based on gender. It's based on race. It's based on our hair. Don't try and go into the AU or the UN with nappy hair on your head because it's not professional. This is what my sisters have told me, okay? It has to be, there was an old saying, I learned it when I went to America. They call it fried, dyed, and laid to the side. That's the epitome. That is the epitome of success and a professional woman, not one with braids or an afro or locks or anything else. So bottom line is that we are going to institutions as Africans, and trust me, Maureen Achieng was a Pan-Africanist. Her approach, her concern, her serious attention to detail and her sensitivity was always based on, again, although serving a wider community within the context of UN, but when it came to Africa and particularly her work here in Ethiopia, great concern towards the women. The project that I worked with her on, as a matter of fact, we raised funds through the sale of arts for Ethiopian women who had returned from the Saudi countries. Many had faced horrible, morbid types of abuse, physical and otherwise. So this is someone who was putting her money where her mouth was. She was not seeking fame or accolades or anything like that. And sadly was naive to think that her job wouldn't be threatened, because guess what? UN, you're a lifer. And that's why people usually toe the line. So if we are here to help strengthen our sisters, be it our illustrious ambassador Arikana, which I'm going to get to that next, but if we can be there for our sisters as they go through this, to let them know they're not alone, that we don't continue to ostracize them, that means something, because there is life. And as Bob Marley sings, it's no woman, no cry. Now, where my ambassador Arikana is concerned, she's a healer. Dr. Arikana, I met her as a healer, although she was doing heavy work regarding the diaspora, health initiative. I knew her as a healer. And she went in with that frame of mind into the AU to try to heal the relationship with the African diaspora, right? And the continent. And they were not ready. They were not ready, but nothing happens serendipitously. It's not that way. I believe that everything was in divine order, and the role in which our ambassador plays right now with the African Diaspora Development Initiative and other work that she's doing, it could not have happened if that sequence of events had not occurred, very frankly, my opinion. Because the AU, again, when you're in an institution like that, it does offer you a level of, it's a platform. It's a very important platform, okay? And it allows you opportunities to pursue certain things that otherwise you would not necessarily have without that AU endorsement, label, if you will. Now, juxtaposed to the UN, where the African Union is concerned, that's our organization. That was made by Africans, for Africans on the continent. Adamawi Haile Selassie, Nkrumah, Nyerere, we can name the brothers, the founding fathers. They did not foresee, nor did they intend, an institution where the invisible hand would have such a prominent place. Now, Africa is not a stranger to strategic alliances. We're not a stranger to partners. You know, we understand all of this. If you go back, anthropologists will show you, and archaeologists, we've been trading for millennia with China, India, etc. So we're not strangers to foreign relations and foreign interest even being here. But when we don't defend what is ours, then shame on us, because what will happen to our children, our grandchildren? What will happen to the next generation? And sadly, it is the voice of the woman that is more concerned with these things. And that's just natural. We're mothers, we're nurturers, you know? And so I do believe that where the African Union is concerned, I will never give up on it. It's frustrating. And like even in our families, you have those moments, right? Where it's so much frustration and you're trying to get through and you're trying to make a way, but we can't give up on it. We have to agitate, as Frederick Douglass said, until the change becomes real. This is our responsibility and our duty. You know, sometimes they say women are nagging. We nag. I'm calling it agitation. I'm calling it agitation for positive change, for productive change, because where we are now in the 21st century, our children are looking at us and scratching their heads. You know, where are we now? And it's so ironic that it took COVID to let the African continent wake up to some degree and realize we're on our own. We have to figure this out. Not even the wealthiest could have boarded a plane to normally go to Paris to visit his, you know, his cardiologist, or go to London to visit his, you know, neurologist or whatever it is. Everything we had to do for ourselves. And if you recall, the media had it that, oh, this is it. By March, I think they said half of Africa was going to be wiped out. April, they were down to maybe 25%. By May, you didn't hear about Africa anymore in the news in relation to COVID. Okay, so where we are now is really looking at African solutions to African problems, just as we did where the peace treaty was concerned. And again, we do have to hand it to the African Union for the role that they played within all of this, right? Africa banded together. Well, it's the same thing with our sisters. Africa has to band together, and we have to remind our brothers and sisters, even ourselves, who we are, what flows through our genes, our DNA, our genetic memory, and where our spiritual compass should be leading us in terms of how we strengthen one another, because women are at the forefront and have always been at the forefront. And we cannot allow a Eurocentric recent narrative that just popped up a couple hundred years ago compared to our existence and what we've been doing in Timbuktu, right? In Zimbabwe, you know, you look at our ancient contributions to the sciences, to the maths, education, you name it. It's time to reclaim who we are. We don't have to invent nothing new. We can tweak it. But let's reclaim our identity. And one of them is an important sisterhood where we don't leave each other out to dry. So for those few words, I thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mama Desta, for that words, powerful message. Really, thank you. And thank you for nailing it, yeah, for bringing the real issue, because this webinar is organized to remember and also celebrate our African sisters who are, because they spoke the truth, because they stood up and spoke for Africans' rights, they are dismissed, and also for those whose name is not mentioned, because they are thoroughly under investigation, and we cannot put their names here. So it's to remember those, to say you are not forgotten, and then also to celebrate their bravery, their courage for standing up. So that's the main reason. So luckily we have Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana here with us, who also passed through the same situation 3 years ago in October in 2019, and then 2021 in October again. We have the two sisters who are dismissed by the UN this time because they spoke the truth, because they saw what's happening in Ethiopia can be somewhere else in Africa. Only for that reason, they were dismissed, sadly. So thank you for all our speakers. Now this is open for questions and answers. We put in the comment sections if you can send your comments or questions. I have one question here already, which is a question, which can be a question for all of you. It is from Ragmawi. If there is something called the UN Whistleblower Act, and why is this act do not protect whistleblowers in the UN? Ambassador Mahlet, perhaps would you like to take first this question, or Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana? Any one of you can come in. You are muted, Ambassador. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. I needed to.
Again, you are muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's actually almost ridiculous to expect the UN to do anything about anything. First of all, UN is supposed to be the watchdog for human rights abuses around the world. What are they doing? What have they done? And in fact, if truth be told, there are videos going around that by day, UN trucks are delivering food, and by night, they are delivering ammunition to quote unquote terrorists. The same UN agency that's fully aware that France is committing some serious crimes in its former colonies, that a lot of these former colonizers are committing some serious crimes that are very well known and very well documented. And yet they remain as 5 members of the UN Security Council. The largest voting bloc at the United Nations, which is African countries, does not have a seat. How ridiculous is that? The African nations simply go to the UN to vote on other people's issues. So how do you expect the UN to really do anything? In my humble opinion, the UN is a toothless bulldog. The UN is not meant for us. The League of Nations, when it was created for them and not for us. So no, I'm not surprised, because there are some serious issues, human rights abuses, that UN could be addressing at a very high level. And I want to start with France being a member of the UN Security Council. If you look at everything that's being done, the crimes being committed by some of the members of the UN Security Council, and these are issues, crimes that have been committed, people murdered, useless coups, all because there was a hidden agenda that they want to pursue. Those facts are well known, well documented. Has the UN done anything? Of course not. So no, I'm not surprised. The UN is a toothless bulldog, plain and simple. I'm sorry, but that's a fact.
Thank you, Excellency. Our speakers, anyone would like to add on that?
Yeah. Very briefly, I would echo the same thing. And again, 60 years ago, His Majesty said these very same words as a head of state and as, again, founder. So he has been seeing it, and he did see it and did track it, and was able to make those interventions 60 years ago. And we've got Rwanda, we've got what's happening in Haiti. We've got so many examples right now on the table that we can look at. And of course, right here in Ethiopia, we know exactly what happened, and I don't want to get into heavily what's happening even within the institution, and how, again, we have sisters that spoke up and said, this is wrong. We need humanitarian aid, and something is not right. We need to check it. And she's gone. Yet still we have someone who is in a similar, well, in a higher position and has such a great voice and such a great sway with no questions asked. So to answer the question about this whistleblower, who is it for? It's not for us. This institution, as Ambassador Arikana say, it's not for us, it's not by us. And I think the greatest thing that the African Union can do is to strengthen ourselves, particularly with the use of women and, again, the African diaspora, because what we are bringing is a different level of passion, experience, and almost desperation, because we know what it's like to live out there in a world where we're so discriminated against. It doesn't matter how many degrees we have, doesn't matter how much exposure, education, nothing like that matters. All they see is the color of our skin, and in our case, that you're also a woman. So if we are continuing to look to the perpetrator for the medicine, for the prescription to fix us, it's not going to happen. We must continue to look within and build our structures. And again, I have to look back at the diaspora. I'm working here now with the Ethiopian Diaspora Service as volunteering, doing our part. And I know what we can bring to the table. I know how important this is, because we on the continent cannot do it alone, nor can those of us abroad do it alone. There has to be that solidarity that comes together with a shared goal on converging interests. We're not going to agree on everything, but let's converge our interests at least on sovereignty, at least on the protection and promotion of our culture and our identity, and not look to the UN for this.
Thank you, Mama Desta. I might have a follow-up question on your comment, but let me just read out this question and maybe you can answer it together. Our sister Shanice, she asked, why are we still expecting those who don't look like us and don't like us to do anything for us through their institutions? As the question goes on, just a second. Why are we not globally and strategically working towards building our own institutions and organizations? Should we not be training the next generation to have the right mindset to take over the running of our countries? Why don't we set up our own institutions and organizations? Maybe it will relate with Mama Desta. You just touched upon it. Instead of looking at the UN, maybe to work for the African Union to strengthen us. But even the African Union, I'm just adding on Sister Shanice's question, we have cases of, like, Her Excellency Dr. Arikana, when you speak up, what follows? So how in that situation or in that environment, how can we enable, how can we rely on the African Union? I am one of those people who say it is for us, the African Union is for the citizens, but continuously we have puppets who are really, working for the invisible hand there. So yeah, what should we set up new institutions, or how can we rely on the African Union?
If I may.
Yes.
Going back to the last question, on various occasions, Ethiopia has really complained here in Geneva of the undue politicization of the UN Human Rights Council. This is what we see here in Geneva, in New York. Previous speakers have said it. The fact that the UN Security Council has not any permanent seat or non-permanent seat, which is only allocated for 3 African countries, even at the permanent seat level, is totally unfair. This is a historical mistake. Africa should be represented at the UN Security Council. Unless we are represented there, unless we are there to follow what's going on there, it's really very difficult to steer the discussion. But coming back to your second question, I would like to go back to what Her Excellency Ambassador Mama Africa, as you called her, and very impressive statement that she made. I quite agree with her. We need to equip ourselves. We need to be knowledgeable. We must be knowledgeable in order to face the challenges that we have in front of us. So unless we are equipped, first of all, we might not be able to face the biggest mountain that is in front of us. So I really also concur with the two colleagues, speakers that have said that we need the sisterhood, but also this sisterhood needs to be complemented with knowledge, wisdom, in order to face and surmount these challenges that we have in front of us. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mahlet. Yes, Your Excellency, you are muted. You are muted. No, still you're muted, Ambassador. You're muted. You're muted, Ambassador.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
For some reason, you would have me. I couldn't mute myself. I wanted to make a comment pertaining to leadership and what we can do as Africans to change our circumstances. Just to echo what Ambassador Mahlet has just said, knowledge is power. So if we are really going to clean up our Africa, we need to start by education from the primary education level, teaching our children our history. I'm sorry, I have to keep saying it, but they need to know the enemy. They need to understand Africa from the root. So now, I don't know if some of you have seen a video that's going around of a 5-year-old boy who was given 2 dolls, one black one and a white one. And he was asked which one was beautiful. He pointed at the white one. He was asked which one was ugly. He pointed at the black one. He was asked which one was nice. He pointed at the white one. He was asked which one was mean. He pointed at the black one. He was then asked which one looks more like you. Very reluctantly, he pointed at the black one. Now, the same young boy who thinks he's ugly, he thinks he's mean, is going to grow up to be the next CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He's going to grow up to be the next prime minister, president. He's going to grow up to be the next member of parliament or minister. Garbage in, garbage out. This young boy is defeated before the game even begins. Sadly, that is the truth about some of our leaders today. If you look at some of the leadership at the AU, people who really cannot have the backbones to stand up and defend our turf. The African Union, as OAU, was created by our Pan-African fathers, so AU can be the voice for the entire continent. So AU can speak out to the wrongs that are being meted to the entire continent. But if we have leaders who have the same mindset as this 5-year-old boy, who then grew up to be a leader, wherein lies the problem? Does that leader even realize they're suffering from this disease? That is Africa's challenge today. Too many of our leaders are defeated before the game even begins. I've seen too many when they sit in front of someone who doesn't look like us, particularly white people, their knees buckle in. They're already afraid. Afraid of what? That is one of the biggest issues we have in Africa today. Fear. Fear of those who don't look like us. Why are we so afraid? It's unfounded fear. It was fear that was intentionally instilled into us. We were born into this fear, born into this idea that we are inferior, that we're not as smart as they are. How long is it going to take before we can wake up and realize that we were before they were? That we as the Africans, we told the world what it means to be human and what it means to be civilized. We had it all before they did. But do our leadership understand that? Does our leadership have the backbone to stand up and defend our turf and speak truth to power? That is what's needed at the African Union. And unfortunately, and I'm going to say it like it is, right now, we don't have that leadership. And until we do, Africa will continue to be divided because the Zimbabwe president cannot speak on continental issues. The Mali president cannot speak on continental issues. The Gambian president can only speak on Gambia. The African Union is the only organization that could speak authoritatively on all continental issues. And if we had a strong, powerful voice at the African Union, a lot of the nonsense going on right now would stop. Because at the AU, you can look at every country around the world and tell them like it is, and call for all the African leaders and say, we are no longer going to the UN for the annual conferences because these meetings are not for us. I'm sorry, we're not wasting taxpayers' money. But until we have such a strong voice, until we have such an awoken individual leading us at the AU, we're always going to be chasing our tails. So it's all about leadership, and leadership that is awoken, and leadership that is fearless. Thank you.
You know, if I may, Mahlet, just picking up on what
Yes.
Ambassador Arikana and Ambassador Mahlet were saying, and examples of our power, both soft power and the use of diplomacy, even cultural diplomacy, and even just our stature as Africa. And let me just look at an example of Ethiopia. During segregation in the United States, which occurred up until 1954, up until the landmark Supreme Court case, which was Brown versus Board of Education. And that case was basically about allowing the desegregation of schools and allowing Blacks to attend school with whites. And while there was two schools of thoughts on it, basically saying separate but equal versus integration was the way to go. Do you know that that same year, 1954, was the first visit of Emperor Haile Selassie to the United States, the first time an African head of state, and remember, we're talking 54, this is before, right, the real anti-colonization movement had taken place. But there was an amicus brief presented to the Supreme Court, and an amicus brief basically is a friendly briefing to the court. And it's a friendly briefing advising the Supreme Court justices on why they should vote in favor or against. This was in favor of Brown versus Board of Education because of the visit of what was called the first African heads of state. And this is a way to show the world that we're not racist. So please, Supreme Court, make this decision to recognize Black Americans. An emperor from Ethiopia, an African, was the one that impacted the trajectory of education in the United States of America. You see, this is power. This is soft power. And this is what we have to continue to evoke. What was said before by Ambassador Arikana was so powerful, and I hope we were listening to it. Look at the countries that are under turmoil, that are under conflict. There is some resource. If you pull it back, you're going to find some resource, oil, uranium, something, cobalt, you're going to find something that is needed and why they're attacking. So it's time for us to really flip the narrative. And right now is the time to do it. What happened in Ethiopia is also now impacting even the conflict in the Congo. Okay, and we're hoping that that is going to also lead to a process towards peace. But if we don't recognize our power, who will? And certainly our children who are looking at us. I mean, how long can we just keep talking about Marcus Garvey and Cheikh Anta Diop? And I mean, it's wonderful. These are powerful individuals. But where's our Garvey now in the 21st century? Who are they? And what are we doing to help develop them? And aren't most of them, a lot of them in this time, going to be women? So many women are writers and advocates and poets and scientists and politicians are emerging. It's important for us to give space, and we can't wait. This is not about waiting for authorization. The Most High gave us authorization when he created us. So when he gives you that authorization and the education to do what you have to do, then you are duty bound. It's not enough that each and every one of us are comfortable in our homes, in our spaces. What of our neighbor? What of our kith and our kin? So this is very important. That example, and I said that's 1954, where an African head of state impacted the laws that today govern how the education system goes where Blacks are concerned in the United States of America.
Thank you, Mama Desta, and also thank you, Excellency Ambassador Dr. Arikana. Before that, also Ambassador Mahlet. But we have one or two, I'm going to take one or two questions. Sorry if I don't read some of your questions, because I think that they have answered it one way or the other when they're answering the previous question. But I have this question from Delina Abraham to everyone. How can we empower young diaspora women to play a key role on the issues facing Africa? And her second question is, how can we galvanize mentorship of African women, such as yourselves, to bring about transformative change? I would say, I think this is where ADDI comes. Your Excellency Ambassador, would you like to take this question?
Absolutely. Again, I sound like a broken record. I find that the best way to empower people is through knowledge. When I started making the videos, I had no idea what an impact the videos would have. It was my only way of saying, after speaking on many platforms, I felt like invariably every question that I would get was, but Ambassador, the African leaders are corrupt. That's after I would have told the people about the 500 billion coming out of Africa from France every year, and the 50 billion, according to the corruption watchdogs, they say all of Africa a year, about 50 billion goes out of Africa through corruption. So here you are, you got two thieves, one with a briefcase with 50 billion, and another one with a briefcase with 500 billion, a little bitty country. So I just told you of the two thieves. So I'm expecting outrage about the 50 billion, but also 10 times outrage about the 500 billion. To my surprise, there was nothing, no questions about the 500 billion. And so I sought out to do the videos. So every time I speak, the listeners have something to go back and listen to, so they can begin to really hear me. But once they started listening to me and they started paying attention, they started saying, well, wait just a minute. This is not right. So really just simply exposing the people to the knowledge, to the facts, to the truth, I find is the best way to empower young people. I am so proud of the young Kenyan girl who during the France-Africa Summit, she turned around and looked at President Macron and said, President Macron, I am going to talk to you in a way that my heads of states will not talk to you. And she proceeded to give it to him. That young lady was empowered with knowledge and facts. The beauty for us is we are coming from a point of righteousness. All we have to do is speak our truth. All we have to do is state the facts. Truth and facts are constant. They never change. Let's give them an overdose of our truth. Let's give them an overdose of facts. And by so doing, our children are very smart. They get it. They're going to get up and say, no, this ain't right. That's not fair. It has to stop. So let's empower everyone, particularly our youth, with knowledge and facts. Two constant issues that never change. And that's the corner where we are coming from.
Thank you, Ambassador, really for that. Yeah, knowledge is really very important. Was it Mama Desta who mentioned Frederick Douglass? I always say it almost sounds a cliche for me now. On every discussion, we have to work on our children and then education. Otherwise, we will find ourselves on that vicious circle every time, working on adults like us. But once we have the children, that wisdom, that knowledge, then Africa will just be fine in 2-3 decades. That's always what I say. I don't think there's a question that's untackled or unanswered so far. We have a comment. I would like to say thanks to all the sisters who is a voice for the voiceless. What's the plan to overcome unforeseen obstacles that continue to be disadvantage of Africans, especially for the women? I think that's it. If you have, I see some of you raising hands, please send it to the chat section. If you have comment or any section, I think, yeah, we are about to conclude. But with that last questions that I read, would anyone would like to take in or come in? What are the plans for women who are, let me just read that again. What is the plan to overcome unforeseen obstacles that continue to be disadvantage of Africans? Meaning, I think the unforeseen obstacle like the invisible hands.
I can take that.
Yeah, okay.
The unforeseen circumstances, I always say, when you hear a story coming out of Africa, a negative story coming out of Africa, always look for the story behind the story. Look for the story behind the story. Most of us are now awoken. Most of us are very aware of the invisible hand. And let's not be fooled anymore. Let's not be fed lies. Let's not be thrown a shiny object and run after the shiny object. So for us to be able to anticipate the challenges, to be able to anticipate and expect the activities of the invisible hand, we need that knowledge. So as young people, before you are being influenced by these NGOs who pay you to go toy-toy is when you run up and down the streets, that's what we say down south. Before you pay to go toy-toy and demonstrate in order to further their agenda, remember, you are being used as an instrument of your own self-destruction. So the only person who can protect you from being used to destroy not only yourself, but your country and your continent is you. And the only way we can protect you as your elders is through knowledge, to say, stop. You know that NGO that seems very nice? You know that missionary who seems very nice? Guess what? 9 times out of 10, they're not nice at all. They're here for another agenda. Have you ever wondered why is it that towards elections of most countries, so many NGOs come into the country? And soon after the elections, what do you know? Miraculously, their funding runs out because their job is done until the next election. And they never support the ruling party. So the opposition could win the elections today. Guess what? Tomorrow, they are no longer supporting the ruling party. They just go with whoever is opposition, because theirs is to infiltrate and theirs is to divide. So let's have this frank conversation with our children, because it is our children that are red meat for them. It is our children. I remember talking to one young man, I won't mention what his name or his country, but he said he was called to some embassy, foreign embassy, I won't mention which embassy, but the question posed to him was, what can we do to help you help your people to defend their freedom? What can we do? He was a musician, you see, they knew he had a platform. What can we do to help you help your people to defend their freedom? And the guy says, well, I didn't think they needed, they didn't have their freedom. But that's how they bring you in. If he was foolish enough, he would have thought, oh, this European nation is calling me, I must be special. But no, this one ran to the president and told them, this is what they're trying to do to me. Too many of us are being wooed in with people who have a different agenda. The only way to protect ourselves is to inform our children about the games that are being played. Particularly, be on the lookout for those NGOs, for those missionaries who come in with their Bibles, the NGOs who come in with their stupid little gifts and donations of money that belongs to us. Be aware of them. They are also one of Africa's enemies. So watch out. For us, let's empower our children. Let's let them understand the invisible hand and the various forms and shapes that it comes in. Knowledge is power.
Thank you, Ambassador, really for reminding that again and again. It's indeed knowledge is powerful. So yeah, to remind our audience again, we are here today, to remember our sisters like Sister Morina Ching, Sister Denia Gale, and also Her Excellency Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, for what they have done to say you are not forgotten, to tell them that we are our sisters' keeper, so that we can do the same to one another. It shouldn't be only in the international organization, but we can do that personally to our sisters, siblings, wherever we are. I think we can implement that. And I thank you for the speakers, for your time and also knowledge sharing with us, and encouraging us as well to speak up for ourselves, to speak up for Africa. That's really important. Ambassador Mahlet, I invite you maybe for 1-2 minutes, if you can give us a final word as a closure of this event or this webinar.
Thank you, Mahlet. Although I did not prepare to make any closing statements, but I myself was very much inspired and learned a lot from Dr. Arikana and Mama Desta. It was a pleasure to hear you speak on such a moving topic. I believe as well, Africa is rich. We have a lot to give. We just need to believe that we have that richness in us, and the only way we need to be able to do that is like what Dr. Arikana said, is to empower our youth, the next generation, and particularly the women. The women are the mothers, the women are the wives, the women are everything in our society. Therefore, if we empower them, then therefore with this knowledge, we can really move the mountains. So with that, I would really thank all of you for your instructive and very powerful messages. Definitely some cliches we will be using in some forums. I hope you would not mind, but it has been very much interesting for me. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ambassador. Last, I have to thank you, really, my colleagues at Defend Ethiopia, and those who are sitting behind the screen and make sure that this is flowing smooth. So yeah, thank you all. If you are here or one of you from Defend Ethiopia, I would like to give you 1 minute or 2 minutes to say something, and then we play a video that's made in campaign for I am my sister's keeper. It's a 10-minute video. We might not see it all, but it's really important, at least for the first 3-4 minutes. That would be nice. From Defend Ethiopia, anyone here would like to share a word? Okay. Yeah, so in that case, then Gagi, Dagmari, can you please put the video or share the video?
I am my sister's keeper. Advocacy for African women in the United Nations and the African Union who are dismissed and silenced for speaking up for Africans' rights. October is quite a month for our African women. It's to be recalled that 3 years ago in this month that the chairperson of the African Union, Musa Faki Mohammed, terminated the mission of its ambassador to the US, Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, after she spoke of the detrimental impact of France's influence in Africa. Dr. Arikana is known to be one of the rarest Pan-African figures that served in the African Union Commission. Her only sin was her strong views on continued France's occupation and exploitation on its former African colonies, which she shared publicly. Exactly a year ago, on 13th October, another two African women by the name Miss Maureen Aching, former Chief of Mission of the United Nations International Organization for Migration in Ethiopia, and Miss Denia Gale, country representative of the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, were fired by their employer, the United Nations. We have also other African women who are victims of the UN, whose name for now remains to be anonymous, because they are being put on a continuous investigation and they are currently unreachable at their workplace. All these African women have one thing in common. They are penalized or put under unnecessary investigation by the UN. Why? Because this Black woman spoke the truth on the war in the northern Ethiopia. Because they stood with the values of the United Nations. Because this Black woman exposed the mess of the UN and the role of Dr. Tedros Adhanom and al. In destabilizing Ethiopia.
Okay, look, I hate what's going on. I've never seen so much dishonesty and willful disinformation. So, I'm not doing this to save my job. My job is not at stake at all.
Okay.
I'm doing this because I love this country. I'm a citizen of this continent. I hate what's happening to Ethiopia. It's happening to Ethiopia today. Tomorrow it will be happening to Kenya. So I feel duty bound to do what is right, stand by the truth, whatever country I happen to be in, especially if it's an African country.
And because they exposed UN's camouflaging of humanitarian aid as a weapon to destabilize a country. In the past 2 years, ever since the conflict in the northern Ethiopia started, the UN has manifested itself nothing but to be a chauvinistic and racist organization and disturbingly highly a double standard organization. Now, why do I say that? We have the main UN staff figure.
I don't want to hold everyone. It's okay. We have seen some part of it. I just wanted to close it. This is the main thing, the main subject matter that we made here today. So again, to remember those sisters, and as we do, to ask ourselves what we have done to encourage that, or to stand by our sisters, to say, I am my sister's keeper. So I just wanted to close with the same video that we opened today. So thank you very much all for your time. So until next time, bye-bye, ciao.
Thank you, bye.
Bye, Ambassador, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, bye, thank you.
እጅግ ክብር ይስጥልን እናመሰግናለን ከልብ እናመሰግናለን
Thank you so much ሁላችሁም ዳግማይ
ዘር ይስጥልን
የዩቲዩብን ማጥፋት ትችላለህ ዳግማይ